Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It's a beautiful day. It's Friday, the 17th of May. I'm pretty excited for the weekend and kind of relaxing a little bit, enjoying the sun. I hope you are too. Good to see folks in here already engaging in the chat. Let me turn off this scrolling thing. That's a little annoying sometimes when I leave it on. Hey, we're going to get started in a minute, and we're going to be talking about KPIs today, but I like giving a tip for those of you showing up early and on time. Some of you might recognize this, especially if you're more experienced or if you've been to my trainings before. But I wanted to just mention this whole idea of something called leading indicators, right, as a result of success. There's these two phrases you might hear: leading indicators and lagging indicators. And so lagging is something that's happening after the fact that you can kind of look back and go, oh. But leading indicators tied together with the top KPIs that I want to talk about today. In this idea, it's funny, Jay, that's exactly what I had in something I'm about to say. Jay just put it in, right? What gets measured gets done. And it's really important because what you're measuring, for the most part, before something happens, what you're measuring beforehand is what's going to get done. And you want to make sure those things are the right activities. And we'll talk about that in a second. But leading indicators, it's really important. That's kind of what KPIs are, right? You're determining what you want to measure. And when you look at that, these indicators are going to be able to tell you whether you'll have a success. So an example is if you measure your sales activities this year and you really track on it, then next year, it's going to indicate whether you're going to have success from a revenue standpoint next year or not. So these are just an early tip for those of you showing up early and on time. I appreciate you doing that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Well, I'm not sharing it, but let me get started on the formal training and then I'll share my screen. So anybody who manages business activities will eventually learn what Jay just said there, right? What gets measured gets done. If you've been doing business a long enough time, you'll understand this whole concept of what gets measured gets done. Unfortunately, that can be for good or evil, right? Maybe not evil, right? But for good or no good. And people often measure the wrong activity. The problem with that is that they're doing a lot of activity, right? So there's more of the activity that's getting measured is getting done. But if it's the wrong activity and they're measuring the wrong activity, then you're just going to get more of that. But that's not the right activity leading to where you want to go. I call this constructive procrastination. Constructive procrastination. The reason I say that is because we could rationalize that it is of some value, but the reality is it is not the most important thing that needs to get done. When you have true good KPIs, it will measure the leading indicators for success. And some of this activity should never be a KPI, should never be measured. And if it's not being measured, then theoretically we'll be able to recognize that, we're working on stuff that shouldn't be done. Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And so right here, he wrote this book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And he talks about something similar to that, right? And you can take a look at his book as you get out there. But this idea of constructive procrastination, it gives us the impression we're doing the right things, but we really are not. We're not doing what needs to get out there. So one clear example of measuring the wrong thing is measuring the amount of leads you have. In the old days, we used to call it a Rolodex. How big was your Rolodex? Oh, I got 500 people in my Rolodex or 1,000. I'm literally passing 30,000 connections or followers on LinkedIn. That's the size of my LinkedIn network, not the rest of my network. I got an even bigger network. But is that any help to the company? That's a great thing that I have this network, but you need to go in and turn something forward. So you don't measure the size of that network. And that network of mine, that's 30,000 people. I appreciate that we're connected, we're following each other, right? But those are just leads, and those leads don't get you a sale. Leads are at the beginning, but you don't really need to measure that. And today, I want to share with you the things that we do want to measure, right? These top key performance indicators that are out there. So let's go ahead and dive in talking about that. If you don't know who I am, actually, it's funny, I'm so used to saying who I am. But before that, I'm just letting you know that today's talk on KPIs, I'm going to cover it down on 2 different ways of looking at it. One is the 7-step process that I teach for federal revenue success. And so a very streamlined process that will lead to success for government contractors. And then the other thing is, for the bulk of the training today, I want to go down and talk about the KPIs, the key performance indicators that I think you should be measuring. It's certainly what I measure with me and my team when we're helping our customers out there. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success and opportunities for networking to others in the government contracting space. I'm hoping you do that. I'm hoping you introduce yourself. If you're on LinkedIn, come over to LinkedIn. It's the only place where you can network, right? YouTube's cool and Facebook or something, but LinkedIn is the professional network for government contractors. I spent 20 years in the federal business as a small business contractor. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process, A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. When you have KPIs in place, you're going to have repeatable, predictable results. You can either predict that they're going to be bad results or predict that they'll be good results, but the KPIs are the ones that will help you make sure that you have that. I just wanted to thank everybody who's subscribed to our newsletter. I hope you do subscribe to our newsletter. If you haven't, it's the Government Contracting Success newsletter. But yesterday we just passed 16,000 subscribers. It's the largest GovCon newsletter on LinkedIn, and it grows constantly, about 1,000 new people a month. This is a really good thing because it's building that community of government contractors. It's bringing industry into a social media way of networking. So we expand beyond just our in-person events or something. And then also, please register for training. I want to thank the almost 100 people who registered for today's training. I've got a whole bunch of training coming out next week that I'll drop in the next day or two. So when you see it, which will come out on the newsletter, right? When you see it, go ahead and register for training. Let us know you're coming. This is a simple way that you can just say thank you to me and my team for putting on this training out there. And then the last thing is just make sure that in the chat, go ahead and put your core competency, 2 or 3 words that let other people know what you do, right? Name of the company and core competency. When you do that, you're expanding your network. And if all you did was meet 1 or 2 people a day when you come into these trainings, I do almost 300 trainings a year. That's 600 people, right? That you can be meeting throughout the year without having to go anywhere but right here to our training. So it starts with you just saying hello to people. Oh, one last thing I just want to talk about is we're getting ready to launch GovCon in a Box. It's really exciting news for us. And this is a web-based solution that's going to help small businesses under 10 million get to 10 million. We're going to solve the 3 biggest problems that small business government contractors have: getting in the door to meet federal buyers, finding teammates who want to work with you, and then identifying, pursuing, and responding to opportunities that your company can win. So if you're interested in learning more about that, when we release it, go get on the wait list, www.govconinabox.com. And if you're already on the wait list and you're feeling generous, put that into the chat, govconinabox.com, so others can see it later. So I wanted to start off the talk around KPIs around the process, because KPIs kind of basically are measuring the activity or the process you're doing. And so I put together a while ago this 7-step process, I think a couple of years at least, 2-3 years at least. I put this together because there's processes out there that are in the GovCon world, the government contracting world, but they're super complicated, right? They're built for large businesses, right? They were done literally for businesses that have these huge teams. You can tell a process is much bigger than what a small business can use when they describe things like color teams, right? If you don't know what a blue team is or a green team, right? If you don't know what those are, then this is for you. This is the right place, because we small businesses don't really have a team. We have like the 5 of us at most. Sometimes it's just 1 of us who are doing all the activities. And so I try to put together a process that was as straightforward as small businesses are, at least up until that $20 to $30 million range. We're still a very tight team. We're not up there with dedicated graphics people and multiple teams that would read a proposal at different stages. It's basically the same person who's reading draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. So this 7-step process lays out what I say needs to be done if you want to have success in a particular agency. Say you're trying to get into the Environmental Protection Agency or Department of Homeland Security, which has multiple components / agencies in there. then the path to get there is to begin with research. You start with research here on the left. And this first process step is about beginning to get in and understanding that agency, beginning to learn about their mission, understanding their goals and challenges. All this information is publicly available. And so as you learn about that organization, that agency, you're able to then also understand their organizational structure and which agencies or offices within that agency are the right ones to pursue. So that research is you showing whoever you're trying to sell to that you care. And people buy from those they know, like, and love. Well, the way you get them to like and love you is by showing them that you care, that you're doing this research. There's another great line that says people don't care what you know until they know that you care. When we do our research, we're demonstrating to whoever we're meeting that we care, right? So the second step in the process is targeting. And this is where you're putting together a list of, if you're in the beginning stages, you're putting together a list of 100 or 200 people that you want to go out to, that you think if I can get to them, then they're going to help me navigate within DHS, let's say. And so I've got a customer, we were just talking yesterday, and next week we're going to follow up. They're trying to get into a new agency, and we will build this targeting list with them. They will build it. We'll guide them along with it. But this target list will have names, numbers, and emails. When you have that, it's beginning to allow you to go into outreach. And outreach is this whole idea of picking up the phone and getting a meeting, that first meeting, right? You want to talk to a teammate. You want to talk to a agency buyer, et cetera. This is outreach. This is not just the first call. It's actually the first few calls until you start moving forward. And if you see the relationship step that I have here, the whole idea of the relationships is you want to establish strategic relationships within this circle. So outreach leads to people you're talking to. And when you talk to them a sufficient amount, you will determine whether they're just in your network or whether they're a strategic relationship. An example is I have these two customers that we had brought together, and they've casually been talking to each other, but now they're about to schedule a recurring meeting every 2 weeks because they really feel like they're connecting, and the opportunities they've kind of worked on a little bit together are good. And so now they'll go into having weekly meetings and talking about a joint pipeline, right? They have their individual pipelines, and then they have a joint pipeline. Inside of an agency, it's the same thing. Knowing contracting officers or program office personnel. When you build these strategic relationships, and a strategic relationship one is where there's mutual growth, a commitment to mutual growth. Even with an agency might want to learn from you, and they'll be willing to talk to you about their agency challenges or introduce you to people. And so that's strategic relationships, right? And the reason I put it in this box is because you're on a path to relationships or until you get to that relationship. But once you've established strategic relationships, you're on what I call this wheel of success that you will continuously win. And so you can see here, relationships lead to opportunities. Opportunities allow you to be able to write proposals that you can then win contracts on, right? So you're landing sales. That's a wheel of success because when you do good work, you'll just keep hearing about more. So when you think about KPIs are measuring your activity. And when you have a proven process, like the 7-step process, this process has activity with it, and you begin to measure it. So that's what I want to talk about here is just some of those KPIs. And again, key performance indicators. These are indicators on whether the performance you're doing, the activity you're doing is going to lead to the results you want. You can see this in federal strategic plans or I can't remember if they call them like action plans or activity plans, but they'll have an agency strategic plan, and then they'll lay out the objectives and the activities that need to happen, and they'll put in place KPIs for themselves. How will we know we're getting to this stage that we want to go? And so your company can put these in place. And I don't care if you're a one-person shop or a $100 million shop, having basic KPIs that every day you can look at it, less than 2 minutes to look at the KPI and go, is it up? Is it down from where I want it to be? So let's start with the most obvious one, right? In any business, the only real KPI that matters is, do we have the revenue we want? Most importantly, do we have the revenue we expected to have at this point? And so you need to have a determination around that. I'm already working with people determining how much revenue do you want for 2025. The reason that is important to determine that out year number is because 2024 activity sales is going to lead to that 2025 revenue. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can look at the current revenue, right, and say, are we on track? If I set a revenue goal next year and say, hey, I want to be doing $6 million, and hopefully I picked the right one, $6 million at the end of the year, like that revenue. Well, theoretically, then I should be making $500,000 in January and $1 million in January and February, right? And $500,000 every month will lead to that $6 million I want. And so when you think about the revenue, you put it in place, but you can measure it on an annual scale. You can measure it on a quarterly schedule, and you can measure it all the way down to a monthly scale. Revenue, you don't need to go down lower than that, but have that revenue goal in place because it drives everything else. The next one is sales. So you want to have your KPIs around sales. If I want a $6 million, if I want $6 million in 2025 in revenue, and let's call that net new revenue, which means I didn't have it this year, but I do have it next year. I'm billing it out. Then because I'm a professional services and IT company, then my typical contracts are 5 years. That means if my goal next year is $6 million in revenue, then my goal this year is in sales, 30 million, because 5 year period of performance times $6 million for 2025 is $30 million. And so I have this sales goal that's out there, and that is a KPI for me in a loose way, right? There's activity, but then I can look in here and every single day I can be saying, how much are we doing? I have a customer that literally wants to grow by $6 million net next year. So we are measuring not even the whole calendar year of 2024. We're measuring the sales activity between now and the end of the fiscal year, right? We know that our goal is to get that $30 million in sales by the end of September. That is the most likely scenario to guarantee that they'll be hitting that 6 million net new revenue next year. And so you want to put that in place as well. What is your sales goal for what's your revenue goal for next year? What's your sales goal for this year? You should have that in place right now. Like if you're going out and knocking on the government's doors, if you're going to conferences, if you're writing proposals, why? Why are you doing that? What are you trying to achieve? How will you measure whether you do success, right? Is it, if you have a 10% win rate, do you need to do 10 times as much? And so when you look at this activity and you're doing all this activity over here, make sure you're always tying it back to some key goals. And then those goals kind of align with those KPIs. So hopefully this makes sense. I have a revenue track. I'm tracking my revenue numbers. I'm tracking my sales numbers. And then I come back on the win rate, right? In the win rate, this is what I was just talking about. If I'm winning 1 out of 10, first off, that's not good. You want to improve that. But if I'm tracking that 1 out of 10, then it tells me I need to be doing a lot more on the proposal side. And if I want to reduce the amount of work I do on proposal or to win more sales, I need to improve the win rate. But if I don't track the win rate, then again, I'm kind of just winging it. I'm not really operating with any level of organizational maturity. KPIs help you begin to put in that maturity. If you're familiar with ISO and CMMI, things like that, these are these organizational maturity type certifications out there. They measure your maturity at different levels and or for different activity. And your win rate is something you want to be measuring on a regular basis. How many proposals are we sending out and winning? How many are we losing? That number you always need to know. And that's what I meant by you could look at all of these KPIs I'm going to give you, and in 2 or 3 minutes, just know where you're at. When you establish a KPI like the win rate, you sit there and say, I want to be winning at least 1 out of every 5 opportunities. If you're below that, then your KPI is flagging to you that we're not doing as good as we need to be doing. Let's work on that. But if you're winning 1 out of 4, then you're kind of in the green is what we call it. Then you're doing fine. And you look somewhere else to go, where else do I need to put my attention? Because right now, win rate is doing pretty good. But unless you have that KPI, that indicator of what's a good win rate in place and then measure it, you won't know that. So that's revenue, sales, win rate. And so let's talk about proposals, right? If you think about you want to win this much money in sales, right? So $30 million, I just said for one of my customers, that's their sales goal for the rest of the fiscal year. Then we back up to the number of proposals. Right now, they're about a 1 out of 4 win rate. So 25% win rate. That means every 4 proposals, they win 1. And so when you think about the proposals, this is a KPI we want to be tracking. We need to get out the door a sufficient amount of proposals. And I'm going to try to say this really fast without having the numbers down. But if I have a $6 million revenue goal next year, what I say is that no proposal, no matter how big it is, can count for more than the entire amount next year, $6 million. And so that means I need to submit at least 5 proposals out there to be able to try to drive towards that direction. For most of us, that's not the case. We're in that 1 to 4 million, 1 to 3 million range. So you have to determine how many proposals do we need to get out. I have a whole separate training on proposals where I say you should be writing 4 proposals every single month. And I do not mean use AI tools or use people and just funnel out and push out proposals constantly and try to send out 10 or 20 and hope you win one. Why don't you just go buy the lottery ticket, right? That's not working with your customer and really driving it forward. What I mean is sending out proposals that are totally aligned to your core competency, what you're good at. And when you send out 4, 3, or 4, you should be winning 1 every 3, 1 out of every 4. Anything more than 25%, I would be looking at the quality of my proposal or the experience we have, and are we writing beyond? But that's a KPI I need in place. 4 proposals going out the door a month. Literally right now, I'm working with a customer where there's 3 in a 7-day period that are going out. 2 of them are sub, 1 is prime, right? It's perfect. It's the 2 that are subcontracting means it's not as much lift for us. And the 1 that's a prime is the one we're putting the heavy effort on. So often you'll find if you're trying to do 4 proposals out a month, 1 of them might be a prime and 3 of them you could be on different teams. When you do that, the numbers are easy. But so anyways, having that KPI for a proposal really just means how many proposals do we need to be sending out? And going with proposals are sources sought, right? Sources sought, especially if you're an 8A small business, sources sought are the chance to push it right to direct award. If you're anybody else, like I was engaging in a dialogue yesterday around women-owned small businesses and how limited the amount of set-asides they've had. Women-owned small businesses, if they want to have more set-asides, need to respond to more sources sought. And then you also have to get more people to kind of come with you as well, like 10 or 20 competitors and get them to write in. That will give the government confidence. But my point is you need to be writing it out, because when you write a sufficient amount of sources sought, first, it opens the door to that agency. It gives you a chance to get in and visible where otherwise you might not have been able to. But also sources sought lead directly to you having a stronger position on the proposal, having a higher win rate, et cetera. And so sources sought, you want to put an amount down there. I actually was just telling one of my customers, because they are very good at what they do, that we should get to 2 a week. 2 a week sources sought on exactly what they do. We actually went into their pipeline this morning and got rid of half the opportunities that were at a certain stage where we're like, you know what, we're talking about that could be done, but let's get rid of it. Let's abandon that and go force ourselves to find more sources sought notices. So these RFI type notices, find more of those that are 100% aligned to what they do. You want to do that same thing. So you want to be getting out sources sought and proposals. By the way, if you're brand new in government contracting, you can do these same things. Your numbers will just be different. So an example is, let's say somebody in our community, I know that they're an expert in artificial intelligence and they want to be building up an artificial intelligence business with the government. Just go to as many people. Remember, I talk about targeting. Go to as many companies as you can and say, can I get on your team as an AI expert? Are you going to have to work where there's an AI play in here? Maybe I get 10%, maybe I get 20%. If you're brand new, don't waste your time trying to write a response all by yourself. Try to get on a team where you're writing 1 page out of 5 pages, right? If you do that when you're just getting started, you can handle the same activity. You just won't be the leader of that activity, but money is money, right? Okay, so the next one you want to be measuring are the opportunities. So as you come back around through that pipeline, we talked about proposals. Understand what I'm doing is kind of reverse engineering that 7-step process. Here in the opportunities, you want to make sure you have a good pipeline. So in here, our KPIs are around the pipeline quantity. How many opportunities do I have in the pipeline? There needs to be this threshold so that if you go plus or minus, let's say 20%, then you start going into the yellow and red. And what I mean is, if you should have 25 opportunities in the pipeline, like you go, hey, that's a good number. Then if you have 35, it doesn't mean you're better. It means you're actually worse, because you're starting to have too much in your pipeline that you're probably not doing anything well. You want to have less opportunities in your pipeline, make sure they are slam dunk, and make sure you're moving them forward. And so total contract value, TCV, is the other one. So in your pipeline, you want to measure the number of opportunities. In your pipeline, you want to measure the total contract value. If I come back to my example with my customer, $6 million revenue goal, $30 million sales goal, 4 times the sales goal puts us at 120 proposal value, right? If you're following the math, 4 times the sales goal of 30 million is 120. And then you back that up at least double, if not, for me, I like going 4 times as much so that I'm moving forward. But if I have a 120 sales goal, then basically I'm looking at about $500 million in total contract value in my pipeline. Will guarantee I'm going to get that 6 million that I want. And so you got to make sure these are the opportunities you can win, and then you make sure you have enough of them. The other ones I had in here is points of contact and other movement, but I want to come down to abandon rate. In opportunities, this is a good KPI to measure, because if you're abandoning, and what this means is if an opportunity comes into your pipeline, even if your pipeline is just a spreadsheet, if it comes in, but you don't write a proposal to it, then you abandon it. Whether you officially do it, like I just did this morning with a handful of them, or you just never get there and you're like, oh yeah, we never went after that. That abandon rate needs to come down, 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 because it is reflective of your ability to see an opportunity and see it as a fit for your company. So, with my customers, their abandon rate is really low because we're able to quickly look at something and go, that's a good thing. And then we're able to quickly qualify it. And then the last one is new opportunities added. You need to be adding opportunities every month, right? You need to keep your pipeline fresh. And when you add opportunities, you can either look at near term if you have to have them. Otherwise, you just kind of look a little farther out. With some of my customers, I'm looking solidly into 2026 and how we're going after sales. For 27's revenue. That's not that far away. It's only 2 years. If you're just starting, you don't have to look that far, right? But it's not that hard for a company that's doing, let's say, 5+ million to really think out several years. Strategic relationships, another one I want you to think about. These are those people I said that when you have strategic relationships, you're going to be able to hear about opportunities. You're going to be able to get on opportunities as part of a team. And you're going to be able to get in the door and start learning more. And so you want to measure those. A KPI might be 8 strategic relationships. If we have less, we're in the yellow or red. We're not doing as well as we should be. If you have more, in this case, it actually is kind of okay up to a certain point. Again, you set your maximum number because strategic relationships take a lot of effort. So you don't want to have too many, but 8 is a good baseline strategic relationships. And the last one is outreach. You want to measure, are we doing daily calls? 5 new calls to new people every single day. Literally, it could take you 15 minutes, but you're digging your well before you're thirsty. You don't need to talk to people, but you're reaching out. You're establishing new relationships. You're constantly keeping that activity moving. And the other is, how many meetings are we having each week? You should have 4 to 5 meetings every single week with different people, not these, any person you're working with, you shouldn't really talk to them every single day, except for like 15 minutes. If you're talking for hours every day, then you gotta watch that. But going to talk to having new meetings, that's a really important thing. It's kind of the idea of daily calls leads to the meetings. And so remember, here's the 7-step process, right? I researched into an agency I want to do. I figured out who do I want to call in those meetings I'm trying to have. The outreach is having those meetings and doing those daily calls. Those will lead to the 8 strategic relationships I'm talking about, and a pipeline that is sufficient quantity and total contract value that's in there. So I can write 4 proposals a month, let's say, and bring in the $30 million in sales that I need. Hopefully this made sense on the KPIs. Here's something I just want you to remember. I know it's a lot of information, the replay is available, but as you think about KPIs, just establish some KPIs, even 3 or 4 at the moment if you don't have any. Establish them, get your colleagues to buy into it. Say, oh yeah, I believe in 1 proposal a month or 4 proposals a month. Get the buy-in and then start measuring it. The measurement is where your success is going to happen, because you'll start getting data that allows you to go, oh, we should do this, or we should do this, right? If you found value, throw thanks into the chat. We always appreciate that. I have a team that sits there and helps make these things happen for you every single day. As you move into the weekend, remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.